Let my 17-year-old son get drunk under my roof to learn his limits and thought I was a cool parent. But then Uncle Dave stepped in and turned it into a life lesson none of us expected. So, I guess I should start by saying I didn't plan on letting my 17-year-old son get drunk. It wasn't like I handed him a six-pack and said, "Have at it, kid." It just happened. And now I'm wondering if I handled it the right way or if I'm some sort of irresponsible parent. It all started at a family barbecue. We had some friends and relatives over, grilling burgers, playing music, just the usual summer backyard thing. My son, Jake, was hanging out with his cousins and some of the older teens, laughing, talking about college plans, and trying to act more adult than he really was. At some point, one of my brothers, good ol' Uncle Dave, handed Jake a beer. "One won't hurt," he said with a wink. Now, I could have swooped in right then and made a big deal about it. But here's the thing. I grew up in one of those households where alcohol was the forbidden fruit, and guess what? That made me want it more. I wasn't about to create that same dynamic. So I let it slide. Fast forward an hour, and I noticed Jake has moved on from one beer to definitely not one beer. He wasn't sloppy, but he was feeling it, laughing a little too hard, leaning on the patio railing like he was trying to hold up the whole house, and at one point, he called his uncle bro. That's when I knew things were escalating. Now, here's the crossroads. Do I shut it down? Give him the "I'm so disappointed in you" talk? Or do I take the teachable moment approach? I went with the latter. I pulled Jake aside and asked him, straight up, "How do you feel right now?" "Griot," he said, waving his arms in slow motion. I nodded. "Cool. Now, if you had to drive home, would you feel safe?" He paused. "Nope." Good answer. Now imagine if you had to give a speech in front of your class like this. Jake cringed. Ugh, that would suck. Yup, that's why knowing your limits is important. You're almost an adult, and this stuff isn't going away. But you gotta be smart about it. He nodded, and I could tell something clicked. We got him some water, let him sober up, and made sure he went to bed without doing anything dumb. The next morning, he was groaning about his headache, and I simply handed him a Gatorade and said, "Lesson learned?" He just nodded. So, am I a bad parent for letting it happen? Maybe, but I'd rather he learn under my roof in a safe place than at some shady party where no one's looking out for him. What do you think? A couple of days later, Jake and I were driving to the store, just the two of us. I figured it was the perfect time to check in. So, about the other night, I started keeping my voice casual. Jake groaned and leaned his head against the window. "Do we have to talk about it?" I smirked. "Well, no, but I was just curious. Did you actually like drinking, or was it just I'm almost an adult? Let me prove it thing?" He shrugged, clearly embarrassed. I mean, it was kind of fun, but also not. Like, I thought it'd feel cooler, but mostly I just felt weird. And that hangover? Never again. I had to hold back a laugh. "Oh, buddy, that's not even a real hangover. That was baby-level suffering. You're lucky I cut you off when I did." He shot me a look. "Wait, you cut me off? Duh. You think Uncle Dave was paying attention? That man disappears when it's time to be responsible." Jake was quiet for a second, then nodded. "I guess that makes sense. So you're not mad?" I shook my head. "Not mad. But I will be mad if I ever find out you're drinking at some random party with no plan to get home safe." He sighed. "Yeah, I figured." Then he hesitated. Does that mean you'd rather me drink at home?" There it was. The tricky part. The part where I had to balance being the cool parent without becoming the negligent parent. I thought about it for a second before answering. "Look, I'm not saying I want you drinking at home, but I'd rather you be smart about it. If you're at a party and you've had a drink, call me. No questions asked, no lecture, no punishment. I'll pick you up. Every time." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? Seriously? You screw up once? Fine. We'll talk about it later. You try to cover it up, lie about it, or, God forbid, get behind the wheel, then we will have a problem." He nodded again, taking it in. "Okay, that's fair." I glanced at him, watching as he processed everything. He was still my kid, but moments like this reminded me he wasn't just my kid anymore. He was a person figuring out the world, making choices, learning the consequences. And honestly, I was glad he was learning with me instead of out there on his own. Later that night, my partner gave me the look, the one that said, "I still think you should have shut it down." But after I explained everything, they sighed, shook their head, and muttered, well, at least he learned something. And yeah, I think he did. A few weeks passed, and life went on as usual. Jake didn't bring up drinking again, and I didn't press the issue. I figured it was one of those things. He'd either take the lesson and move on, or he'd test the waters again when the opportunity arose. Either way, the ball was in his court. Then came the party. I was watching TV one Saturday night when my phone buzzed. Jake, hey, don't be mad. Can you pick me up? Now, if you're a parent, you know that when a kid starts a sentence with don't be mad, it's basically a guarantee that you will be mad. But I took a breath and replied, Me, where are you? He sent me a pin. It was a house in a neighborhood I vaguely recognized. Definitely not a family friend's place. Me, you good? Jake, yeah, just had a little too much. Didn't drive. Just need a ride. So, this was the moment. The exact scenario I had prepared for. I grabbed my keys and headed out. Trying to suppress the mix of proud he made the right choice and mildly annoyed he put himself in this situation to begin with. When I pulled up, the house was alive. Music thumping, kids spilling out onto the lawn, red Solo cups everywhere. The usual high school party scene. Jake was sitting on the curb with his friend Tyler, looking very not okay. His eyes were a little glassy, and he had that telltale, I just realized my body is 70% liquid and might betray me at any moment expression. I rolled down the window. You need a bucket? Jake groaned. I think I'm okay. Tyler helped him up, giving me a sheepish look. Sorry, Mr. H. He only had a few, but I think it hit him harder than he thought. I nodded. Yeah, that'll happen. Appreciate you staying with him. Tyler patted Jake's shoulder. See you, man. Feel better. Jake climbed into the car, immediately letting out a long, suffering sigh. Ugh, I hate this. I chuckled. Yeah, it's a real blast, huh? He leaned against the window. You're not mad. I shrugged. I'm not happy that you ended up like this, but I'm glad you called me. That's what matters. Jake sat quietly for a minute, then mumbled, Uncle Dave makes it look way more fun. I barked out a laugh. Yeah, well, Uncle Dave also thinks cargo shorts are peak fashion. He's not exactly a role model. Jake snorted. Fair point. By the time I got home, he was already half asleep. I made him chug a glass of water, handed him a couple of ibuprofen, and let him crash in his bed. The next morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table, hair a mess, nursing a piece of toast like it was the only thing keeping him alive. I poured him some orange juice. So, lesson number 2? Jake nodded slowly. Oh yeah, big lesson. He took a careful sip. Alcohol is so overrated. I smiled. See? You didn't even need a lecture. He groaned. No, the headache is the lecture. And just like that, I knew this was a moment he wouldn't forget. Because sometimes, the best way to teach a kid something isn't to punish them. It's to let reality do the talking. A few days later, Jake seemed back to normal. Well, mostly normal. He was still eyeing Gatorade like it was holy water and had a newfound skepticism toward Uncle Dave's stories of legendary nights out. Then, over dinner, he dropped an unexpected question. So, what was the first time you got drunk like? I nearly choked on my food. Excuse me? Jake smirked. Small. You're all about teachable moments, right? What was your moment? I set my fork down, debating whether to be the censored parent or the real parent. Screw it. Real parent. All right, I said. Picture this. I was 18. It was my freshman year of college, and I thought I was invincible. Jake grinned. Oh, this is going to be good. I leaned forward. So, my roommate, let's call him Todd, because his real name isn't important, and also because Todd just sounds like a guy who would make bad choices. Jake nodded. Agreed. Todd somehow got his hands on a giant bottle of cheap vodka, like the kind that should only exist for cleaning wounds or fueling a rocket ship. And being the absolute geniuses we were, we decided to mix it with Mountain Dew. Jake's eyes widened in horror. Oh my God, right? I should have known then that I was making a mistake. But nope, we went full speed ahead. The problem was, it didn't taste like alcohol. It just tasted like radioactive sugar. So I kept drinking and Jake winced. Oh no. Cut to 2 hours later, and I'm in my dorm bathroom, trying to convince myself that if I just concentrate hard enough, I can time travel back 30 minutes and undo my choices. Jake burst out laughing. Did it work? Oh, totally. I woke up in the future, 6 hours later, curled around a laundry basket like it was my long-lost soulmate. Jake was dying at this point. Please tell me there's more. I sighed. Oh, there's more. Todd, being Todd, thought it'd be hilarious to draw on my face with a Sharpie while I was passed out. Jake practically fell out of his chair. No way. And I didn't realize it until I went to class the next morning. He was wheezing. What did he draw? I grimaced. A very detailed, very anatomically correct drawing of a certain male body part. Right on my forehead. Jake had literal tears in his eyes. You're lying. I wish I was lying, Jake. I wish this was just a story I made up to entertain you. But no, it's very real, and my entire intro to psych class got a front row seat to my humiliation. Jake wiped his eyes, still laughing. Okay. That was the best teachable moment yet. I smirked. See? And that's why I let you figure things out in a safe place, so you don't end up like Todd and me, making terrible choices with Mountain Dew and Sharpies. Jake grinned. Noted. I will never drink anything mixed with Mountain Dew. Good. And if you do, I'll make sure my roommate doesn't have a Sharpie. I pointed at him. Exactly. And just like that, we had another moment. Not a lecture. Not a punishment. Just an honest conversation, a little laughter, and a lesson he'd actually remember. And honestly, I think that's the kind of parent I always wanted to be. A couple of months passed, and things went back to normal. Jake wasn't suddenly a party animal, nor was he swearing off alcohol forever. But I could tell he looked at it differently, more aware, more cautious. Mission accomplished. Then came the wedding. A distant cousin was getting married, and the whole extended family was invited. Fancy venue, open bar, the works. And, of course, Uncle Dave was there in all his glory, already double-fisting beers before the salad course even hit the table. Jake and I exchanged a knowing look. As the night went on, I noticed Jake hovering near the bar, clearly debating whether to push his luck. The legal drinking age was still a year away for him, but it was a wedding. These things had wiggle room if no one was paying attention. Eventually, he came over to me and sat down. So, if I hypothetically grabbed a glass of champagne for the toast, would you? I cut him off. Not care? Yeah, I let it slide. One glass. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? I smirked. I'd rather you have one with me here than go sneaking off with Uncle Dave and end up making terrible life choices. Jake grinned. Yeah, fair point. So, when the toast came, I watched as Jake took his one glass of champagne and clinked it with everyone else's. He took a sip, nodded in approval, then leaned over and whispered, "This is fine, I guess. Kinda just tastes like fancy Sprite." I chuckled. Yep. And yet, for some reason, people pay $200 a bottle for it. He shook his head. Adults are weird. The rest of the night went smoothly until Uncle Dave struck again. By dessert, Uncle Dave was deep in his cups. I mean slurring, tie loosened, calling the DJ bro levels of drunk. At one point, he staggered over to our table, dramatically plopped down next to Jake, and threw an arm around him. "Kid," he slurred, "let me teach you the real secret to drinking." Jake tensed, clearly very aware that this was one of those defining moments where life could take a turn. I just sat back, arms crossed, ready to see how he'd handle it. Uncle Dave continued, completely oblivious. "You see, the trick is, you gotta pace yourself. For every 3 beers, you gotta have 1 water." He nodded sagely, as if he'd just revealed the meaning of life. "Keeps hydrated. That way, you can drink way more." Jake blinked. "So, your trick to drinking less is drinking more?" Uncle Dave pointed at him. "Exactly." Jake turned to me, deadpan. "I see what you mean now." Dave is not a role model. I barely held in my laughter. "Welcome to the realization, kid." Uncle Dave patted Jake's back, grinning. "Ah, you're a smart one. You'll figure it out." Then he stood up, grabbed another beer, and proceeded to spectacularly fail at the cha-cha slide. Jake just shook his head. "Yeah, I think I'm good." And that was the moment I knew. He'd gotten it. No lectures, no dramatic punishments, no rebellious phases, just real conversations, dumb stories, and a front row seat to Uncle Dave's chaotic life choices. Jake had learned what he needed to learn. And honestly, I think I might actually be doing this parenting thing right. The weekend of Jake's graduation trip came, and I won't lie, I felt a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was proud of him for handling things so maturely. He had proven, time and time again, that he could make smart choices, that he understood his limits, and that he wasn't the type to get caught up in some dumb, reckless high school stunt. On the other hand, he was still my kid. No matter how responsible he was, there was still a little part of me that wanted to wrap him in bubble wrap and keep him from making any mistakes. But that wasn't realistic. At some point, I had to trust that all those years of conversations, lessons, and yes, even letting him get drunk under my roof had actually meant something. So I watched as he packed up his bag, throwing in hoodies, his battered sneakers, a random bag of chips like that was enough food to last a weekend, and try to play it cool. Got everything? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. I think so, he said, stuffing his phone charger into his backpack. Then he paused. Wait, should I bring, an actual pillow? I snorted. Unless you want to wake up with a crick in your neck, yeah. He rolled his eyes. See? This is why I ask you stuff. It was such a simple comment, but it hit me hard. Because when I was 18, I didn't ask my parents stuff. I didn't check in. I didn't tell them what I was up to, and I definitely didn't come to them for advice. I figured it was easier to just not tell them things, because the answer was always no. But here Jake was telling me things, asking me things, checking in. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. And that was the real win. I helped him load up his duffel bag, gave him a probably too long lecture about safe driving, and stood in the driveway as he pulled away with his friends. It was a weird feeling, like this was the first real step into the next part of his life. For the next 2 days, I kept my phone close. Not because I didn't trust him, but because, well, what if he needed me? Of course, the first night, there was radio silence. No texts, no calls. And even though I knew he was fine, my brain still ran through a list of completely irrational worst-case scenarios. What if he forgot to eat? What if someone dared him to climb onto the roof? What if a bear stole his car? Then, on the second night, my phone finally buzzed. Jake, still alive. No dam choices. Be proud. I actually laughed out loud. Me. Not even one dumb choice. Jake, okay, fine. I burned a marshmallow so bad it basically became charcoal. But other than that, no. Me, tragic. You'll never make it as a campfire chef. Jake, I accept my fate. It was just a simple exchange. A couple of texts. But it meant something. He wanted me to know he was okay. He wasn't just checking in because he had to. He was doing it because he knew I cared. And when he finally got back home, sunburned and very exhausted, I just grinned at him. Well, I asked, how was it? He dropped his bag on the floor with a dramatic groan. It was awesome. We hiked, went swimming, played some dumb card game where I lost 6 times in a row. Sounds like you need to work on your strategy. Oh, it wasn't strategy, he said, flopping onto the couch. I just have horrible luck. I chuckled. And the drinking? He shrugged. Yeah, I had a couple of beers, but honestly, I just didn't feel like drinking that much. And that was when it really hit me. I never had to scare him into making good choices. I never had to play the strict parent, role, and ban alcohol like it was some mythical evil he had to avoid at all costs. Because I had trusted him. And because I had trusted him, he had learned to trust himself. That was the moment I knew. It was done. Not parenting, of course. That part never really ends. But the part where I had to constantly worry if he was ready, that part was over. Because he was ready. He had proven it. And even though a part of me would always see him as that little kid who needed me to hold his hand while crossing the street, I knew he didn't need me in the same way anymore. He'd take it from here. And honestly, that was the best feeling in the world.